This happened just this past Saturday, 2 days ago. I'm a 19-year-old freshman at university, having recently moved from a small town to a big city. Everything's been new and exciting, and I've been trying to meet people and put myself out there. There was this guy I'd been talking to on Tinder for about 2 weeks. He was cute, seemed nice, and we had a lot in common. As a bonus, he studied at the same university, though he was older, already had his degree and was working on post-grad studies. The first time we met, we grabbed coffee last Monday, exactly a week ago. It was great. We really hit it off. And when he asked if I'd like to get drinks, drinking age here is 18, on Saturday, I happily agreed. We met up at a local bar and had a fantastic time. For 2 hours, the conversation flowed effortlessly, and it felt like we really clicked. At one point, I needed to use the bathroom, so I excused myself. When I came back, a man was waiting just outside the restroom. He stopped me and said, "The guy at your table put something in your drink. Do you want me to call the police?" I froze. The words hit me like a slap, but I didn't know what to do. I thanked him, but told him no. Everything was fine. I convinced myself it had to be a misunderstanding, or even a cruel prank. I liked the guy I was with and wanted to believe he wouldn't do something like that. Still, I couldn't let it go. When I got back to the table, I decided to address it head on. "I'm sorry," I said, feeling awkward. "But this is going to sound insane. When I came out of the bathroom, some random guy told me you put something in my drink." He laughed, like we were sharing an inside joke. "That's insane," he said, smiling as though the whole thing was absurd. He didn't seem to take it seriously at all. I apologized, saying I didn't think he'd actually done anything, but that I'd feel a lot better if he just chugged my drink to prove it was safe. "This has never happened to me before, and I know it's awkward," I said. "But I'll pay for the drinks, and I'm really sorry to even bring it up." He smiled and said it wasn't a problem. "I just need to go to the bathroom first," he said. I waited. 15 minutes passed, and he still wasn't back. I started to feel uneasy, but gave it a little more time. After 30 minutes, it was clear he wasn't coming back. Embarrassed and unsure of what else to do, I paid the bill and went home. When I got home, I decided to check Tinder. That's when I noticed his account was gone. Deleted. At first, I thought maybe the date had gone so badly, or my reaction had seemed so crazy, that he decided to delete the app altogether. But deep down, something about it all didn't sit right. Still, the whole thing kept bothering me. I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling, so I decided to do a little digging. I Googled him, hoping to find something, anything, that would either reassure me or confirm my suspicions. Nothing came up. Today, I decided to go one step further. I went to the records office at my university and asked if a person with his name was currently studying here. The woman at the desk politely told me that kind of information was private and she couldn't share it. So I tried another approach. I asked if anyone with his name had ever earned a degree from the university. She looked it up and said no. No one with that name had ever obtained a degree here. He lied to me. He told me he'd done his undergraduate degree at my university, but clearly, he hadn't. Or worse, he gave me a completely fake name. That's when it hit me. I'm now almost certain he had terrible intentions and actually spiked my drink. If it weren't for that stranger who noticed and warned me, I don't even want to imagine what might have happened. The thought sends chills down my spine. Even now, I can't stop thinking about it. I deleted Tinder immediately. I'm grateful I never gave him my phone number or my address. He did offer to pick me up for our dates, but thankfully I said no. Still, I made the mistake of mentioning that the coffee shop we met at was within walking distance of my apartment. That means he knows the general area where I live. He also knows my first and last name and where I go to school. There's probably nothing I can do about it now. I doubt he even gave me his real name. But the whole experience has left me shaken. I'm lucky, and I know it. But it's terrifying to think about what could have happened if things had gone just a little differently. When I was about 16, my dad, brothers, and I lived in an old rundown house in the middle of nowhere. It was a private rental, but instead of traditional rent, my brother would do work for the landlord to cover the costs. The landlord himself didn't come off as particularly creepy, at least not to me. That could have been because I rarely went outside when he came over to talk to my dad. Plus, he wouldn't dare do anything inappropriate in front of my dad. One day, I was home alone. My dad and brothers had gone out, I can't remember where, and the only company I had was my dog, who was fenced in the yard outside. I was in my room, probably playing The Sims 2, when I saw a car coming up our long driveway. My bedroom window faced the driveway directly, so I could always see or hear when someone approached. This car wasn't my dad's, and the sight of it made my stomach drop. I immediately recognized it as our landlord's. I panicked. Running through the house, I shut all the blinds, turned off every light, and double-checked that the doors were locked. My landlord lived about 2 miles away. His was the closest house to ours. But this wasn't the first time he'd shown up unexpectedly. Twice before, he'd come by when I was home alone. Both times, he'd just wandered around outside for about 10 minutes before leaving. It had been unsettling, but he hadn't done anything overtly threatening. This time was different. I grabbed a big kitchen knife and hid under the kitchen table. I could hear his car pull up and the sound of him opening the front gate. My dog went crazy, barking loudly, but instead of ignoring it, I heard him shout, "Shut up, mutt!" Then I heard his footsteps coming up to the door. He tried the handle, testing to see if it was unlocked. My heart was pounding as I frantically texted my dad, letting him know what was happening. My dad said he was coming straight home, but it would take him about an hour to get there. Meanwhile, the landlord didn't leave. He walked around the outside of the house, peeking into windows as he went. Our house was old and had 3 separate doors leading outside. I could hear him trying all of them. At first, I tried to convince myself that maybe he didn't know I was home. Maybe the last 2 times were just coincidences. But then he started calling my name. That's when I realized he knew I was home, and he knew I was alone. I couldn't make out most of what he was saying through the double brick walls, but I quietly crept through the house, following the sound of his voice as he moved around outside. My heart was pounding as I tried to catch more of his words, hoping to understand what he was doing. Then he said something I'll never forget. "I'm going to burn the house down, but I'll let you out first." Those words sent a chill through me. At the time, I didn't take him seriously, which in hindsight terrifies me even more. He wanted me to take his threat seriously. He wanted me to come out. That's the part that still haunts me. He was trying to lure me out, and I know exactly what could have happened if I had believed him. My life would have been completely different. He stayed for at least 30 minutes, maybe closer to an hour. He was persistent, walking around the house, calling my name, trying the doors. I stayed frozen, clutching the knife under the kitchen table, barely breathing. Eventually, he left, before my dad got back. When my dad came home, told him everything. Every word, every detail. We moved out not long after that. To this day, I still don't know how he knew I was home alone. My dad never saw him on the drive back, so he must have left the moment he gave up. But how did he know I wasn't with my dad? Sure, there wasn't a car in the driveway, but how could he be certain I hadn't gone out with them? It's a question that's lingered with me ever since. First, let me describe the nightmare. It's a very short dream, but it stuck with me for years because of how terrifying it was. I was about 4 or 5 years old, maybe 6 at the most. My twin brother and I shared a room at the far end of the house we grew up in, with a bunk bed against one wall. In the nightmare, I was lying in my bed, looking out the window. The sky was an unsettling red, the kind you see in the early dawn hours, before the sun rises, but with enough light to bathe everything in an eerie glow. Suddenly, a man appeared at the window. He was bald, with piercing, almost unnatural blue eyes, and he stared right at me. That was it. The nightmare ended there. But I remember the sheer terror I felt. So much that I woke up screaming and couldn't stop. It's one of my clearest childhood memories, probably because of how scared I was. When I woke up, I don't know where my twin brother was, but my mom came rushing in to comfort me. She calmed me down and took me to her bedroom, which was down the hall. That detail stuck with me because I wondered why my dad wasn't there at the time. Fast forward to this May. My dad was in the ICU in a hospital in Colombia, the country he lives in. My twin brother, our older sister, and I were staying in a hotel just a 5-minute walk from the hospital, trying to be there for him and support our extended family. One night, after a long, exhausting day at the hospital, the 3 of us were back at the hotel, sitting together and having a couple of beers to unwind. We started talking, and somehow the topic of nightmares and dreams came up. I told them the story of that nightmare, like I just described it to you. Without missing a beat, my sister said, "That actually happened." I froze. She went on to explain that she remembered the whole thing. At the time, my sister was about 9 or 10 years old, 5 years older than my brother and me. Her bedroom was right next to ours, facing the front lawn and the street, while our room faced the neighbor's house and their driveway, separated by a low fence. She didn't go into too much detail about the days leading up to that event, but she said she had noticed a bald man in a truck following her while she rode her bike home with friends several times. The day before my nightmare was no different, except this time, the man had driven past our house. At the time, my sister was a latchkey kid. My brother and I had to attend a special school about 45 minutes away to address a speech impediment common in twins, so my mom would pick us up after school. That meant my sister would usually be home alone for about an hour after school each day. That afternoon and evening had been completely normal, as my sister remembers it. My dad came home from his jobs. He worked part-time as a cop and at a local hardware store, and we all had dinner together. Afterward, we did the usual family things, homework, playing, and just hanging out before bed. That night, though, around 12 or 1 a.m., everything changed. The bald man had parked his truck down the street at a small industrial park. From there, he walked to our house and tried to get in through my sister's bedroom window. The sound of him fiddling with the window woke her up, and when she saw his face as he nearly got it open, since it wasn't locked, she screamed. My dad stormed into her room. According to my sister, he either shoved the man out of the window or tried to hit him with his nightstick. She couldn't remember the exact details. Whatever happened, it was enough to make the man run off, but only for a moment. A few minutes later, the man came back this time trying to get into the window in my room. He tried opening it, but fortunately it was locked. My mom had made sure of that, because our bed was right up against the window, and she didn't want my brother and me opening it. I screamed as loud as I could when I saw him, waking my brother in the process. My mom rushed in to grab us, while my dad ran outside, trying to chase the man down. He bolted through our backyard, disappearing into the darkness. Our backyard was unsettling at the best of times. It backed up to a small rail yard connected to the industrial park, and the area between the rail yard and our neighborhood was thick with dense trees. That part of the yard was pitch black at night, and my dad didn't want to risk being ambushed in there, so he returned to the house. Once back inside, he called the police and then checked on our elderly neighbor to make sure they were safe. Meanwhile, our mom stayed with us, trying to calm us down after the terrifying ordeal. That's all my sister could remember from that night. It was such a long time ago. Neither of us has been able to recall much more, and the story just seems to end there. Sadly, my dad passed away recently in the hospital, so we can't ask him about it. None of us have thought to ask my mom yet, but maybe I will soon. I'd like to know more, even though it's a memory I can't seem to forget.